Hello, and thank you for joining us for the first episode in the Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion Celebration Series, an 8-part live webinar event that will share the experiences and recommendations of female leaders in fire and emergency management. The EDI Celebration Series is a program of the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs in collaboration with Firefighting in Canada through a generous grant from the Motorola Solutions Foundation. My name is Laura Aiken, editor of Firefighting in Canada, and today we are joined by Karen Fry, Fire Chief for Vancouver Fire Rescue Services, and Chief Martens, Deputy Fire Chief for Canmore Fire Rescue, who will introduce us to the origins and mission of the EDI Celebration Series. If you have questions during the webinar, you can type them into the chat box on your screen at any time, and we will address them during question period after the interview. With that, Chief Martens, I will turn the introduction over to you.
Good morning. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone at Firefighting in Canada. We're really excited to be able to partner with you on this project. I'd like to start today by recognizing that we are all gathered from we are gathered today from all territories. And so I would like to acknowledge that we are all on Indigenous lands. We need to respect the treaties that were made on these territories, acknowledge the harms and the mistakes of the past, recognize the ongoing present-day discrimination still faced by Indigenous peoples, and we dedicate ourselves to moving forward in partnership in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. This celebration series is part of the CAFC's A Fire Service for All initiative that comes from a report of the same name. The goal is to identify and to recognize women leaders in fire and emergency management in Canada. By fostering opportunity for people in underrepresented groups to connect, to learn from each other, and to share ideas, we will make the fire service, we will make a service we all love better, a better place to be, and a service that is more representative of the communities that it serves. The women that you meet throughout this series have found success in the fire service long before we really started talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Their backgrounds and histories are each unique and provide us a great opportunity to learn. When we seek to understand the experience of others, we learn and grow, and the fire service will become better. This series is for all the women who have come before us and for all those that will come after. We applaud the women who every day, through their dedication and perseverance, make the service better. If we can see it, we can be it, and that is what the celebration series is really all about. The CAFC and the members of the EDI committee will review each session for key learnings that we can build and share. I thank my colleagues on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, the Motorola Solutions Foundation, and our administrative team at CAFC. Finally, thank you again to Laura, Firefighting in Canada, Chief Karen Fry, and all the participants included in our celebration series. We are grateful that you have stepped forward and are allowing us to share your stories and perspectives. Welcome to all, and Laura and Karen, back to you.
Thank you for that wonderful overview of the EDI Celebration Series and introduction. Now, Chief Fry, let me start by asking, why did you pursue this career path?
Wow, great point. Before I start, I actually just want to say two things. So along with Chief Martens, I'd like to recognize that I'm standing on or working today on the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. So grateful for all the work and them setting up this land and for us to work in today. And also today is National Transgender Awareness Day. So as part of diversity and inclusion, I think it's really important we all recognize that today as well. So now back onto it. Why did I start in the fire service? Great question. Probably from when I was really young, I actually was going to go into, I was going to be Nancy Drew. So I was going to go into policing when I was about 10 years old. And then I realized I wasn't tall enough. So there were barriers back then. But I've always been involved with service. So I was involved in Students' Council and always giving back to the community. And so service was really big for me and giving back to the community. I ended up wanting to go to law school as well. but I realized at that point in time, I'd be sitting in front of and reading books all the time as well. So it wasn't really the right career choice. And finally, you know, back in the day, it was when 911 was first being introduced in Canada, and that to me resonated a little bit. And that's how I got involved and how I started in the fire service. Somebody approached me one day and said, "You'd make a great dispatcher. Would you be interested in working?" I'm like, I don't know much about it, but you start researching, and that's how I got in.
So what kind of training or background did you have when you started?
Yeah, so compared to everybody else in the fire service at the time, I was working in a grocery industry, and I had a lot of customer service skills. And I started taking computer courses because this was in the mid 90s. So computers were not just for playing solitaire anymore. We were learning how to use computers. So that's what I started doing. So I had my first aid. I took courses on Word and Excel and learned how to use computer systems. I had previous training through communications. I'd been a dispatcher for Loomis Courier, if anybody knows who they are. Way back in probably the late 80s, I'd worked for them for a summer or two. And that was really about it. It was all of the customer first experience, and that was one of my biggest strengths.
So how would you characterize your experiences like as a woman in the fire service?
Yeah, that's an interesting question on my experiences as a woman. I was the first, not the first woman dispatcher, but when I moved away from dispatching to one of the other roles as a coordinator or a pre-planner, I was the first woman. And so clothes didn't fit, uniforms didn't fit. There were no women washrooms. There were no facilities for women in the fire halls at the time. There were expectations about the job and what you needed to do the job that didn't really fit with me. It's been a lot of firsts. And then when I became a chief officer, I was the first woman chief officer in that department as well. And then as a first female chief in 2 departments now. And so it's been a lot of firsts. I stand out, and I've always stood out, it appears to be. So as a woman, sometimes I've gone through periods in my career where I've just wanted to blend in, but you're always standing out. People always recognize that there's a woman in the room. But I go to conferences and I go to meetings, and I'm so excited nowadays to see that there's more women in these meetings and in these conferences. But for years, I was always confused as somebody else's wife or maybe a vendor, but not really a chief officer or a woman in the fire service.
So what hurdles, this sounds like a number of hurdles that you had to overcome. What helped you overcome these hurdles?
Yeah, so I think some of the things, you know, one of the big things that I really I built relationships, and a lot of those relationships were, again, with there weren't a lot of strong women role models for me in the fire service, none actually. So I built relationships with a lot of men in leadership positions that aligned with the same values that I had. And I could learn from them, and they could be confidants when I needed it, because boy, you need confidants being a woman in the fire service at various times. You know, and a lot of times you feel really alone. And I'm sure a lot of people feel really alone at times in the fire service, whether you're on the floor or a chief officer or in emergency management. So you need to have somebody that you have trust with, that you can use as a sounding board. I like to talk things out, and that's how I get things off my chest. I built relationships as well outside of the fire service with other colleagues in local government. So when you're at a higher, as you move up in the fire service, you'll have people in your parks department or your city manager's office or in human resources that you can build relationships where they give you a broader perspective on how business works. Off the job, it's tough. It's tough to build those relationships. People don't really understand the role of the fire service, and or don't realize some of the struggles because it's not part of the culture anywhere else. And so it's different. You can't go back and talk to a teacher and say, these are some of the things that I'm going through. It would probably surprise a lot of them, you know, because we are far behind. We are about 20 years behind. I did a lot of training, so I continually felt like I had to prove myself. So I got a degree. Once I joined the fire service, I took a lot of management courses. I learned from my mistakes, and I learned to own up to them when I made them. I'm just looking at a couple of things. Yeah, and I think I really put in the work. You know, early on in my career, I worked so hard to try and make sure I understood all the things that didn't come naturally to me. So the things about fire operations, or because I wasn't a firefighter. So I really worked hard at learning as much as I could about those different areas and about the fire service in general. So put in the work, and those are kind of how I overcame a lot of them. But it's really about the relationships and the colleagues and working hard.
So as you move through your career, you know, how would you characterize your experience as a leader in the fire service?
Yeah, I think as a leader, you know, I've been challenged. I've been tested on several occasions. I've had to work through mental health issues the same as everybody else in the fire service, and I'm not ignorant to the fact that we're all suffering at various times. I don't feel it's been as difficult as what others may have found in the areas. Sometimes it's about being in the right place at the right time, or standing up for yourself. I think a lot of it comes with age and maturity as well. And when I first worked through the fire service, I was pretty green, didn't really know what I was in for. And now I consider myself seasoned, and it's not just from too much sun. It's from a lot of experiences and breadth. And I think as a leader, I realize now that all these people are looking at me, and you've never really felt that way before. Like I thought my role in the fire service was really about things that I was passionate about, which was mental health and wellness and looking after our firefighters. But what I realize now here, being in a really large department, is my role and the expectation for me with diversity and equity and inclusion in the fire service. And you know, that really seems to be a bit more prominent right now, which I will embrace. I didn't think, even when I came to Vancouver, that it would be such a big topic, because I thought that we're kind of getting there, but you realize that we still have a lot of work to do. And it's a little bit intertwined, because I think the mental health and diversity and inclusivity really play a lot together. And so that's how I'm correlating a lot of it. If we don't look after that part of our work, of diversity and inclusion and equity, the mental health issues are also not going to be looked after, because we have to be inclusive and treat everybody and look after each other across the board.
On that note, what are your top 3 recommendations to fire departments seeking to create a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce?
Yeah, so some good topics, and you know, I'm going to go on here because I've got time now, since I rushed through all the first ones. You need to invest the time and money. So we say how important everything is in our organizations. Training is important. We need to have the best trucks, and we need to make sure that we do everything right in the fire service. We need to invest money in looking after or creating a diverse workforce. And it's not just a checkbox. And we've heard that. You can't just say, well, we have a respectful workplace training, or we've hired 6 women, check, we're done. It's not just about hiring the people to do the job. It's about creating the equity and inclusivity with that. And you have to invest money. So our police partners have a whole team of people for recruitment and outreach. And some departments, I'm going to say in the US, might have a chief of people person, chief of people, or people, chiefs that actually address and work with the human aspects of our job. And so one thing that I'm doing, and I'm just itching to get this done, because I've been here now 3 months, is hopefully in the next week, I'm going to put the pressure here on any of my city manager watching this. I'm going to be posting for a deputy chief of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And why a deputy chief? Because it's that important. It needs to report directly to the fire chief. It's not a captain, it's not a lieutenant, it is at the highest ranks. And so we need to invest the time, and they're going to focus on creating equity and diversity and inclusivity all across the organization. And it's not just about hiring the people, it's about everything else that we do, and look at everything from a lens and invest the time and money into our whole organization from that lens. So that's the first thing. So creating positions to put people first. And you might not have the money to create a position, something like this, and we had to juggle, but you have to look at what are our priorities. The chiefs need to walk the walk. That's number 2. And so as a chief officer, or the highest leaders, or the mayor and council, or the city managers, wherever you're at in your organization, you need to believe it, you need to live it. So I can't, as a chief officer, I can't go into a fire hall and say, oh, well, you know, every time we hire women, they always go on maternity leave. Have we ever heard that, right? We can't hire more women, they're just gonna go on maternity leave. That's not walking the walk and talking the talk. And that's one component of being a leader in the fire service. The other part is about setting the expectations. And I think when we heard a few weeks ago at the first seminar that Chief Martens was hosting, is we have to stop the talking and the antisocial comments from the beginning. Really at the highest level, we have to stop those and set our expectations right from the beginning. And chiefs have to do that, because so many times chiefs are part of that, whether it's a battalion chief or an assistant chief or a deputy chief or the fire chief. We have to stop with the teasing and the bullying and things that just aren't appropriate. And because if I'm joking about a culture, thinking that, oh, well, they're fine with it, well, they might not be. And we're not really thinking all the time about how I would want to be treated. It's how would they like to be treated? And instead of trying to think from yourself or your perspective, you really need to put yourself in their shoes and think, okay, so if I was that individual, how would I feel? So from the top down, we have to set the expectation, and we have to walk the walk. And you have to follow through with it. We can't just say it's not acceptable. You have to be prepared to call people in once they know your expectation and hold them accountable for their bad behaviors. So many times we hear from individuals and organizations and in the fire service, sometimes we move them, right? We've heard that for years. We move the problem person. So who gets moved? The diverse individual that's struggling. We move that person out of that environment instead of dealing with the problem. They're not the problem. It's the other leaders that are the problem, or the captain or the firefighter or whoever it is in that organization. They're the problem. And so they're the ones that need to move. Do we always hire the right people? Do we ever make mistakes and hire bad firefighters? Yes. And they can be of all different diversities and cultures. They can be white men are bad, and they could be, it doesn't really matter. If they're not successful because they can't do the job, then that's our problem, and we need to deal with that early on. Also with Chief is we have to continue to use the dialogue all the time. We have to correct the words we use and the tones we use, and I'm so proud of the staff, even in Vancouver, that they're catching themselves, and I'm hearing them catch themselves. We use terms like senior man. We use terms like fireman. When I say we, I don't mean me. I say organizationally, I hear those terms coming out, and I'm so proud of my chief officers or even the firefighters on the floor now that are catching themselves saying that. And it's habit. It's just a habit that they're using that, and it's not intentioned for the most part to be male servant. It, I believe, is once they realize the reason why, they're going to change, because what that means is when you keep talking about a fireman, you're saying I'm not part of that group. So those are things that we need to change the dialogue on. One of the other things I think is we need to change what makes a good firefighter. So you heard me say you need to be able to do the job. And we hear that a lot. I don't care if they're white, pink, blue, green, as long as they can do the job. And in the fire service, we have to define, what does the job mean? And only, 4 to 7% are actually that really hard physical work, but 70% of what we're doing is related to medical calls, or 90% of what we're doing is interacting with the public. And so to make a really good firefighter nowadays, you need to have communication skills. You need to be compassionate. You need to have empathy. You need to be a problem solver. You need to have fitness. Instead of just saying you need to be fit and strong and compassion and a hard worker or a team worker. Think about the way in where we focus those words. And instead of putting the strength at the front as a primary identifier, put something else at the front that actually attributes to what we need to do as a job to be successful in our community. And it could be something that women bring or a different diverse culture bring. And it could be compassion, because we do need to be compassionate in our job. The community is expecting it. You need to be culturally aware. Those are things we need to do. So chiefs just need to continue to walk the walk. The third thing I think we need to do is, as leaders, is training and education. And we need to change it. We need to change it through our fire officer programs. We do a great job of teaching our fire officers about fire tactics and emergency scene management and how to put out the fires. We don't do a good job of training them through a supervisor of respectful workplace training or diversity and equity and inclusion, and why that's important in a fire hall. And ultimately, you're the officer and you're responsible for what happens in your fire hall. We need to do a better job of that, and we need to focus on that as leaders, which is also going to not just be our officer training. We need to think about our respectful workplace or diversity and inclusion training for the whole organization. And then even down to our recruit training. And, where do we start that and how do we change that? And I'd suggest that, through your recruit training, because you're going to invest in it early on, right? We're going to invest in resources. You're going to reach out to places like your wildfire. So we know probably Ontario Wildfire Service and BC Wildfire Service, they have a broader, diverse group of employees. And that's tough work. So I'm sure a lot of them can do it. You're going to go to community groups and community centers. So temples, talk to some of the leaders about outreach and how to engage with their cultures, and sports and sport teams and university levels or high school levels. And then we're going to create opportunities for diverse candidates to try it. So we have one of my colleagues in Surrey, they have a women's firefighting weekend. And they might do it a couple of times where they invite women in to try it. Because so many times you might get through the first couple of stages and you've never actually tried to see what it's like to do that physical component of being a firefighter. So giving them an opportunities to be successful through practice and drills. And then some organizations are actually hiring or having somebody from within that diverse center or group. So let's say your women's committee may then mentor some of those potential candidates coming through so they could help them learn about what it's really like to be a firefighter in the fire service. Those are a couple of things. Yeah.
All right. And for our future leaders, what are your top 3 recommendations for those seeking leadership positions in fire?
Yeah, top 3 recommendations, leadership in fire. We're going to be done this in no time. Yeah, so I think sometimes it's if anybody's interested in a leadership position, don't be afraid to change the landscape. So, you know, I started off as a dispatcher, for those that don't know, back in 1999. Didn't last too long there, probably only like 2 or 3 years. And then I moved up and took a risk. And that risk was to apply for a position that was outside of seniority. So anybody in the fire service or unionized position knows how that goes generally. A whole set of issues that came with that. And then continue to learn and to grow and to continue my education with that. And then I got to a point where I had a confidant or a good mentor above me and a chief officer. And he said, I'd really love you to be a chief officer one day, but I don't think that this department's ready for that. I don't know. I don't think that they can do it. So I started looking elsewhere because you have to have that little bit of a drive. And so I think if you truly want to be successful or to create more knowledge and understanding as a leader, it's not a bad thing to kind of leave your organization and to go to a different one. And we're seeing that a bit more. Sometimes years ago, people would be hired in a fire department and stay there their entire career. And we still see that now because a lot of people can have success in that role. Not a lot of women that I know that are in leadership positions have stayed in the same fire department throughout their whole career. They've had to move on to get those different experiences or to be provided the opportunities for some of those different experiences. So don't be afraid to change your landscape, to try a new thing. Sometimes when you then go to a different department, you're going to take your old history and all the knowledge you had, and you're going to take that to your new department, and then you're going to learn new stuff. So you're already 3 steps ahead of somebody else because you do have a different perspective, and it's not just because we've always done things this way. So that's a big one. I would also say for individuals as leadership, don't be afraid to put your hand up. I think women a lot of the time, or diverse groups, I think we're always good to be in the background doing a lot of the work because we're doers. And I think sometimes we're afraid of failing. And maybe I'm generalizing a little bit here because everyone's watching us. So sometimes we might not put our hand up and take a risk about trying something new or for a new project. Back, you know, I'd never been in operations division. And at one point in my career, there was a prevention area that they were missing a chief officer. And I said, you know, I've got a little bit of background. I'd worked with prevention officers, understand their records management that they had learned. And I put my hand up and said, I'd like to take that on. And I'd like to learn more about that. And fortunately enough, I was given the opportunity, and that just created a lot of my knowledge that I have nowadays as well. So you need to be able to put up your hand in order to try those things. And sometimes you're going to be told no or not yet. So find somewhere else. And sometimes it's outside of your organization. And sometimes it's with like the Canadian Fire Chiefs or the BC Fire Chiefs or a community partner. It could be something that you do through maybe a hospital foundation board, or if you're a unionized person, maybe through your unionized affiliation. Put your hand up and start working on projects. It's interesting right now. Something came up the other day, and it was, we had a big windstorm here on the weekend. And so we pulled out this old document from 2008, I think is when it was, on windstorms in BC, and it was a collaboration, and my name's in it. And I forgot that I knew there was this document, and we always refer to it, but I forgot that my name was actually part of it. And so those are all the things that you take as opportunities to put your hand up, to learn new things, and that's going to make you a better leader down the road, because you always forget about all the things that you've done until you sit and write them down. And I know of some chief officers that a lot of times those chief officers keep a running list of everything that they've done. You know, like, and I see that in resumes of people, right? They've got all these courses. Courses are great. Experiences are also wonderful. So even committees that you can be involved in, ways that you can actually affect change, I think is applying those, and that is really something that we need to do more of as women in the fire service, because I know that women out there are doing lots of great things in the background and probably not taking credit for it. Right? Probably not taking credit for it, not having their names put on the published document, but yet they did a lot of the legwork in the background. So that's important. That's two. And that's probably where the thing is, it's going to be those stretch projects. Find a stretch project where you're going to learn something. And so right now we have stretch projects in our city that would involve homeless encampments, or data and analytics, or different ways of looking at diversity and inclusion, or response types, or anything like that. You have to find a stretch project, and it's really great if you can find that stretch project that reaches outside of the fire service and touches somewhere else in your local government. Because that's local government, city managers are not looking for firefighters to be fire chiefs. Let's be perfectly clear. City managers nowadays want professional people that have a diverse background. And when I say diverse, I mean a broad range of experiences that understand budgeting, that understand how the fire service fits into the whole cog of the city, and not working in a silo. So find those stretch projects where you have opportunities to work with different organizations within your local government or outside of your local government. And those are things that have made me successful. And I would totally encourage others to try those as my recommendations.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights and recommendations with us today. We have some questions, so we'll turn it over to see what's here. All right. As an officer in the fire service, aspiring to rise in the ranks, what educational paths would you recommend for career progression?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because one thing that I recommend, and it doesn't really matter what your background is, you're going to get your fire officer through the fire service. You're going to get those. Personally, I recommend business type of courses, or local government. A lot we'll have a program through local government municipal association in British Columbia. I generally recommend business because you need to know about budgeting, you need to know about critical thinking, and those are the type of courses that I find have the biggest gaps. And those gaps, when people move up the ranks in the fire service, are usually the human resources and the budgeting are big gaps, especially when you move into chief officer roles. I would also say everybody nowadays, if you're not doing it, you need some training on emotional intelligence. So reach out and do something about that, because it's like you need to know how to read people and how to engage with people. But we're running a multi-million-dollar business in the fire service, and so you need to understand business. Another thing that I'm just going to keep throwing them out there. Another thing that I would recommend that I see gaps is labor management. The labor unions do a wonderful job of training their staff or their executives on labor management processes. And those include litigation type or labor board. So a lot of the times when you get into senior management, we're missing that. And I would recommend that either when you're in the union, get involved with the union and take advantage of all the training that they're providing. Or if you're not in the union, then take some of those courses, which is really, and if you're a non-unionized department, you don't need maybe the labor management, but you do need to know human resources and how to manage individuals.
Okay. We have another one here. How can we increase the number of women in leadership roles?
Yeah, hire them. No. Yeah, so well, we're only probably 4% in the career, and it's slightly higher in the volunteer paid on call section. We're not getting a lot applying. So I've hired 2 or 3 officers, 2 officers since I've been in Vancouver. And I'm not sure how many qualified candidates I've seen that are women that came through on that, even externally. So we need to create opportunities to mentor each other, or to have them, to have women progress through the ranks, or to get the training that they need in order to be a chief officer. Because as we know in the fire service, you need the experience and you need credibility to be a leader or to be a chief officer. So some of those different stretch projects are big. And everybody else knows too, once we have great candidates out there, they get snapped up real quick. And if you're a strong candidate and you're a woman, people want you on their team. And not just because you're a woman, but you actually bring something different and a different perspective, and people want you. So we just need to start preparing or finding opportunities for our women in the fire service to find those leadership positions. And I'm not sure what it is. We need them at the lower ranks and all the way through. It's not a full answer.
Does a woman still need to be more credible in 2021?
Is that, do women still need to be more credible?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah, I don't disagree. It feels that way. That's my observation. Yes, we have to be credible. Everybody needs to be credible. But you have to be the right person for the job. And so many times throughout my work history, so not even in the fire service, when I've seen women progress into higher positions, sometimes it's not the right woman. And by saying that, they're not being authentic and they're not credible. And I struggled with that at different times in my career, where I was trying to be something I wasn't. I was trying to be a hard, non-emotional, not caring about people individual, which is really difficult for me. And so my credibility was probably challenged a bit during that. And it's about credibility and being vulnerable. And I think we need to continue to do what we can to be our true selves, and to make sure that we're only stepping up if you truly want to be. Don't just do it because you're a woman that you feel like you feel like you're being pushed into a position. Wait until you're ready, and you will know when you're ready. And sometimes it's a little bit of a stretch, and if it's a little bit of a wiggle room, then do it. But if you know that you're far off and you're not quite prepared, go back and get yourself prepared so that you are credible when you go up. Because I'm sure I face that now. I'm sure that I have critics out there that will say, well, she wasn't a firefighter. What does she know? So I'm sure to some people, I'm still probably not credible or valued, but I go back and say, well, I have all these other skills. Do you have those? And I'm not putting out a fire. That's your job. I'm here to manage an organization and to make sure that we provide you guys with the training and education and resources you need.
Okay. And what message can you send to those little girls to help them come to the fire departments?
Yeah. You know, so many times you see these little kids at playgrounds or elementary schools, and you know, I just want to stop and I want to talk to them and say, you can do it, because little boys are automatically there, right? You give boys fire engines when they're little. I give gifts of for babies. I give them fire trucks, and I'm starting to do that. Actually, there's a Barbie firefighter, but I think it's really important that we continue to demonstrate those in everything we do, and we need to even have women on the face a bit more so people see it. And that could be from maybe your public information officer, or in your advertisements, or in your campaigns. I'm not saying cut all the white men out, because they're still a large part of our organization, but we need to have some more representation in some of our communication. And that's how we're going to get little girls in. And we need to tell them about how fun it is. And we can't just have on our cartoons, you know, Paw Patrol, not that I even know what that is, but you know, it's a dog, and I'm going to guess it's a boy dog. We need to represent more diverse cultures and women in the fire service in everything we do.
Great answer, and such great questions. I think that wraps our time up for today. So thank you to all of our interactive participants and each attendee for your time as well today. This webinar is being recorded and will be emailed to all those registered within 24 hours. We hope you enjoyed this presentation and that you all have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.